Hello, this is Kyle, also known as Alien Dude, and today, instead of a sword review, I'm going to be talking about Combat Con, which I just got back from, as well as giving you kind of a sneak peek at some of the haul I brought back from it. So if you're not familiar with Combat Con, this is the 11th one they've put on, and it is a pretty good sized HEMA tournament, and they also have some lightsaber tournaments in there as well. It is held annually in July in Vegas. So far, I've only seen it at the Flamingo, but I haven't been to all 11, so it might have been at other locations before the ones I've been to. Now, they have, like I said, it's a HEMA tournament. That's the primary focus of it. They have a lot of different tournaments of HEMA styles, such as longsword, rapier and offhand, side sword, saber, messer, a whole bunch of different tournaments. The last couple, they've even done full armor tournaments. And there's a lot of people that come to this to compete in those tournaments. In addition, they have something a little closer to my heart would be their cutting tournaments, which are generally run by Philip Martin. And they had both advanced cutting and open cutting. Now, I didn't enter into it because I don't feel like my skills are good enough to compete in an open cutting tournament. I would prefer a beginner one, but maybe next year, we'll see. And in addition to all those tournaments, they also have a good number of vendors. The majority of them are going to be tailored to the HEMA side with stuff like fetters and training blunts and protective gear, that kind of thing. But they also tend to have at least a few vendors that sell sharp swords, which is right up my alley, of course. Now, every year that I've been, they've had both Albion and Sterling Armory, and this year was no exception. I know in years past they've had Arms and Armor and Angus Trim there, although I have not seen them. This year was the first year that they also had Valiant Armory, and it was really good to see them there. And in my opinion, one of the best things about going to these kinds of cons is getting a chance to meet and talk to the different vendors such as Albion, Sterling Armory, Valiant Armory. I've met and talked to Mike Sigmund of Albion, Chris Fields, Colton Mogg, and Josh Warbear of Sterling Armory a lot. And they're all great guys. It's a lot of fun to talk to them. You can get a lot of insight into both the making of the swords and just the general business of selling swords by getting a chance to talk to them. And they're very open about with their knowledge, and generally just really great guys to talk to. Like I said, this was the first year that Valiant Armory came to one of these cons that I'm aware of, and I was really glad to see them because I got to meet Sonny Suttles and Zach Suttles, the two primary people that do Valiant Armory, and it was really great talking to them. I had a really great in-depth discussion with Sonny Suttles and another person where we talked about some of the models that Sonny has developed and how Sonny could implement little improvements that can be made, that kind of thing. Stuff that you can't really get in online discussion because, when you're talking about a lot of little minor details, it really helps to have the sword that you're discussing there where you can pass it around and point out little bits of little things, little details that you can't really do properly online. One of the other really good things about attending these events is meeting vendors that I'd never heard of before. And that brings me to my first acquisition, which is this shield right here. I'd been looking for a shield for a while. I'm not really going to train with it. I'm not really going to learn. I'm not going to beat it up or anything like that. But I wanted to have a shield just to try some cuts with arming swords while holding a shield, moving it around just to get an idea of what that feels like. And I found this one from a company called Desert Dwarves, which is run by two guys. And they sold me this shield for, honestly, what I consider to be a dirt cheap price. Now, I'm not going to get into very much details about anything I'm talking about here because they're going to get their own videos in the future. But it's really nice to be able to find this kind of vendor and support them when I had never heard of them before. I don't think I would have ever found them if they hadn't been at Combat Con. And now that brings me to my sword acquisitions, and I'll start with one that probably doesn't need any kind of introduction from me, and that's this Albion Principe Principe. I'm not sure the exact right way to pronounce it, but this one is a sword I've been trying to get for a while, and it was great to finally fulfill that desire and pick this sword up. In particular, I actually really like the the blackening on the hilt is a little bit, looks to me a little bit like in between the Albion's typical blackening and their antiquing, because it's a little bit more of a gray and it's a little bit blotchy, and I think it actually works really well. Again, I'm not going to go into deep details here. The Principe is most certainly going to get a full review on my channel. I don't know when, but I will go into my typical detail when I get around to that. The second sword I bought was this Valiant Armory Irish Ring long leaf blade, and it was really tough choosing what sword to buy from Valiant Armory. I knew I wanted to buy something because I think I was actually the reason that Sonny and Zach went to Combat Con a few months ago. I don't remember exactly when. They had gone to Blade Show in Atlanta, and when they came back, they made a post about it, and I replied to their post saying, hey, you guys should come to Combat Con. And they took it to heart. Sonny told me that because of that post, they decided to come. So I wanted to support their decision and buy a sword from them so that they can hopefully go to more shows. You know, I would like to see them go to SoCal Sword Fight and to Combat Con and a bunch of other sword shows, especially because it really surprises me. In the sword collecting community, I think Valiant Armory is a pretty good name. But at Combat Con, there were a lot of people who had never heard of them before. And in fact, I heard multiple people who, as they were walking past Valiant Armory's booth, they were looking at the swords and like, are those Albions? It's like, no, they're Valiant Armory. You know, they're pretty much right up there with Albion in terms of quality and fit and finish and just overall aesthetic. So it kind of hurts my soul a little bit for Valiant Armory to not be getting the recognition that they deserve. So all that is a long-winded way of saying that I wanted to buy a sword. I had originally thought I was going to be buying the Vision Milan because I have been wanting one of those for a while now, and they had two of them there, and I picked it up, and it was everything that I expected it to be. It felt so good in the hand. I try not to form too many opinions on a sword when I'm just picking it up a little bit at a con, because you really can't get, at least I can't get a good impression of a sword without time, experience with it, and moving it around where there's absolutely no fear of hitting somebody walking past. So, but it was everything I expected it to be. And I was expecting, I'm going to buy a Milan. And then I saw this sword, and I'd seen these swords before, mostly on Age of Chivalry, and they'd always caught my eye as looking really, really cool. But I never really expected to buy one because it's such a big sword. You know, I'm not a big sword guy. You know, I can appreciate them, but I tend to, my preferences tend to err more on the light and lively, maybe a little bit shorter size swords. But then I picked this one up, I pulled it out, and I was like, this doesn't feel anything at all like I expected it to. I thought this was going to feel like a hefty sword. That's not to say it doesn't have weight. It definitely does have weight to it, but it feels amazing. At least the little bit of moving it around I did. And I just decided I had to buy this one. It was just so nice in the hand. And so I ended up buying this one. I still want a Milan at some point. No idea when I'm going to be able to buy that because Combat Con has wiped out my sword budget for a long time at this point. Now, this sword, I blame my wife for me buying. Not really, but I'll get to that in a second. So this is an Albion Kingmaker with DBK pommel markers and a DBK scabbard. If you're not familiar with DBK, you should be, because Brian Kunz is the best scabbard maker in the world as far as I've found. And he had this set for sale. He shared the booth with Albion, as he oftentimes does. And he had this set for sale at an absurdly inexpensive price for his work. His scabbards are just works of art. And the way he had this priced, I basically got the Kingmaker for around $200. and the scabbard at full and pommel markers at full price. I could not pass that deal up, especially because of what I said with my little joke with my wife. She had gone back to the room to rest, and I'd been eyeing this sword and eyeing this sword. And I sent her a text and said, "Quick, talk me out of spending money I don't have." And she gave me a quick one-liner about how, you don't have the money, you shouldn't spend it. And then she spent the next 10 minutes telling me that she didn't mind me buying a sword and I should go ahead and do it because I deserve it. So I love you, honey. You enabled me to buy the sword and I bought it. And I can't wait to get a chance to try this out. The Kingmaker is an absolutely gorgeous sword and this scabbard is absolutely beautiful. And by the way, if you haven't had a chance to meet Brian, again, somebody else who is just an absolute delight to talk to, such a nice, gracious person, and just an absolute joy to interact with him and pretty much all of the vendors that I interacted with at CombatCon. Now, these last two swords are not mine. I bought them for some friends who sent me the money. I bought them these swords from Albion, and then I'm going to be shipping the swords to them. But before that, they gave me permission to do reviews of these swords before shipping them. So I want to say thank you to sword friend Robert and sword friend Victor for allowing me to review these. And Victor is Vic from Unsheathed Sword Reviews. Be sure to check out their review channel. They do some really great reviews. So up here is the one from Victor. This is the Albion Kern. And it's a sword that I'm really excited to do a review on because it's such a unique sword. This is a Type 19 and you just don't see a lot of them out there. I'm really excited to really get into the details about this one and see what I think of it. The other one here is the Lancaster, which is a Type 15, which is a sword type that I don't have any experience with. I have experience with 15A. I have a couple of those, but not with arming sword version. So I'm really excited also for this one also to see what I think of this. Now, since these aren't my swords, I'm going to try to get them reviewed as quickly as possible. They've moved pretty much to the top of my review schedule. I'm going to try to get the reviews for them out in August, which means I'm going to need to bust my butt to get them done without sacrificing my normal review quality. So this is what I'm going to be working on a lot for the next few weeks as I try to get everything done for these two reviews. Once again, thank you so much to both Victor and Robert for allowing me to review these swords. I really appreciate it. And that's going to wrap up this video. If you have not been to something like CombatCon or SoCal Sword Fight, or there's a few other cons out there, but as far as I'm aware, those are the two biggest ones. I highly encourage you to try to make time to do it. It is a ton of fun to see both sides of the discussion, the HEMA side and the cutting and the sharp sword side. It's just a lot of fun. You can meet some really great people. I met both HEMA people and sword collectors. There's some crossover there, but not as much as you might think. And it's just a blast to go to a convention and be immersed in a group of people that all share your passion for swords, assuming you have passion for it. I certainly do. And even as an introvert as myself, I still just love hanging out and talking to people about it and just being able to geek out about swords without feeling a little self-conscious with talking about it with people who aren't really into it. I have some friends and coworkers who I'll talk about it a little bit, but they're not sword nerds. They might think they're kind of cool. They might have a slight interest in getting one sword at some point, mostly because I think I encourage it. But it's something else entirely to be just surrounded with people who share that passion. So if you can swing it, I highly recommend trying to make it to one of these events. CombatCon is every year in July in Vegas, and SoCal Sword Fight is every year in February in Southern California. So until the next video, Alien Toot out.